فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Today I want to follow up with some of the tips and tricks for a student of knowledge. And one of the things that I want to talk about, which is specific for students of knowledge that that are converts. And many of us that become Muslim, we look to start up our studies, our Islamic studies, and we want to come and we want to learn about this deen. We want to learn it in the best way. And of course, some of the basic things that a born Muslim would know how to do, such as reading Quran, is something that is one of the hardest things for a new Muslim to come and learn how to read the Quran. And this is something I want to encourage all of the new Muslims that are out there, or someone who maybe is so far away from the Arabic language and nobody has taught them to learn Quran. I want to give them some tricks and encouragement for their studies and for seeking knowledge. So one of the things that we should always know is, why are we studying the Quran and why are we reading the Quran? Yes, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, for every single harf that we recite from the Quran, there's 10 hasanat. And so this is something that, yes, we recite the Quran so that we will get the reward from this. But is this the only reason that we recite the Quran? No, this is one of the reasons that is like an incentive for us to recite the Quran, but this is not the goal in and of itself. The goal is لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, and this is so that we actually ponder the meanings of the Quran, and that we would actually understand what the Creator of the universe is telling us, and how are we supposed to worship Allah. And this relationship that comes when somebody has a close relationship with the Quran, this is a close relationship with Allah. And there's so many hadith that talk about the benefits of the people who are people of the Quran, and these people are on a higher level, and the best of people are the ones who study the Quran and they teach it as it comes in a hadith. And so this is something, of course, this is the real reason, is so that we can apply the Quran in our life, and so that we understand it, and so that we can ponder its meanings and mull it over and have that close relationship with Allah. And this is first and foremost the reason why we do it, not just so every single letter that we recite we get 10 hasanat for it. And looking at some of the things as a new Muslim, when I was first coming to recite the Quran, of course I had like the big tajweed with the transliteration Quran that I got. And transliteration, for somebody who doesn't know how to even start reading Arabic, this is something that maybe is a tool for somebody to get started. But of course, many scholars, they say it's not even permissible to have that transliteration written down, because that's not Quran. And of course, the Quran can't be translated into another language, and also the huruf, or the letters, they can't be put into another language. So if you are at that state where you're reading like a transliteration, know that there's going to be mistakes that come up, and you need to learn the actual letters of the Quran. And this is only something that someone does out of necessity. If they need to start off with the Fatiha, that they start off with this. And for that, inshallah, they're forgiven as long as they're doing their best to learn how to recite the Fatiha. And so, also, we should know what our limit is when we're reciting the Quran, and we should be very stable to stay within our bounds. And the best of actions are the ones that are consistent, as it comes in a hadith. And this is something that when we are consistent with our relationship with the Quran, this is something that you'll see over time that you've gone very, very far. And yes, I remember when I first was learning Quran, I was reading with some brothers at the masjid that they were showing me the letters, and they're getting me to say each one of the letters. And then when I was actually able to read like words in the Quran, it was a big milestone for me, because I was able to differentiate the letters. And of course, this was something that it takes practice. And if you do this practice, say you take 30 minutes before one of the salah, and you go to the masjid early, and you read and you read and read for 30 minutes every single day, after a while you'll find that you have developed a skill that you didn't have before. And also, if you do this every single day and you become constant with it, it'll be something that's very good for you. Many born Muslims, such as like the Arabic born Muslims in general, they will have an ability to recite the Quran very, very quickly. And for a new Muslim coming into reciting the Quran, it would sometimes take me up to 10 minutes to recite a single page. One, because the breaking, like, I would make a mistake and then I'd go back and fix the mistake. And also, like, reading was something that was very difficult. And this is a skill that with time it comes. But originally, this is something that it took a lot of like plodding away and just keep and a lot of patience with myself to actually get to a point where I could read the Quran fluidly and where it's fluid. And if you are reading the Quran and you are able to read like a page and like say but you're not able to read it fast, this is not the most important thing. Of course, in the future, if you have memorized a lot, then it's easier for you to recite what you've memorized more quickly. But for someone to recite and they make the goal of the recitation to recite a juz in 15 minutes, this is ridiculous. And I say ridiculous, especially for like a new Muslim, but even for someone who is like a Muslim, what did you get out of that recitation in 15 minutes? That juz that you read juz amma in 15 minutes. Okay, did you get something from that? Did you ponder anything that was in there? And this is the actual reason why we're reading it. And so if somebody is going to spend their time reciting words and they don't understand any of it, or they're not even pondering any of it, and it just flows out of their mouth without it, and you'll find that some of these people that do this, if you ask them to recite slowly with tajweed, they're not able to. And so this is a problem that I've seen with a lot of the, especially I'm like in Egypt, so I've seen some of the kids there, and I, like, even after learning Arabic, I don't understand what they're saying, you know. And I wouldn't know how to fix them if they made a mistake. I'm like, what's this? And I see that this is what a lot of the kids do, and they'll learn the whole Quran without any tajweed, and they'll recite it so quickly, and they'll have so many mistakes in it when it comes to tajweed and when it comes outside of it, and they don't understand a word of it. This is not the purpose of us learning and reciting the Quran, but rather it's for us to ponder the meanings. So know your limit, as I was saying. You need to know your limit, and also if you can do more, and if you can increase the time that you can do reading the Quran, try to do that. And eventually, this is a skill, just like any skill. If someone's riding a bike, they don't just pick up a bike and can start riding it right away. They have to practice, and that equilibrium, it comes after time. And this is the same thing when you're reading in another language, a foreign language. You're going to have to practice it, and eventually it will become easier. And eventually, yes, you can recite more quickly. But of course, the main goal is that you are coming closer to Allah, and that you are worshiping Allah with this recitation, and that you recite properly, and that you recite with some type of understanding. Of course, you should start learning the major words that come up in the Quran. As I mentioned in a previous video, Quranic is a very good app for somebody. One, it has a place in the app where you can actually learn the actual letters, so alphabetical learning, so you can differentiate the letters. So if you're going through this app, you would look at the letters and you would see when the letter pops up in the flashcard format. You would say the letter after you hear it, and make sure that you repeat the letter after you hear it. And after a while, you'll be able to see the individual letters. And then they have like 2-letter and 3-letter words. And after a while, once you get that basic, then you can go to the next part, which is actually learning words. And there will be the most common words. If you learn the most common words in the Quran, this is something somebody can do within the series of a few months. They can learn the most common words of the Quran using this app and whatnot. And this is something you'll get a basic understanding of the gist of what you're reciting, and this will make it much more enjoyable. And of course, if it's more enjoyable, you'll be able to have more patience when reading it, and you'll feel that you've accomplished something much more than if you're reading something you have no clue of what it is. And of course, this is inspiration for all of us to make sure that we learn Arabic, and that we learn what we can of Arabic. And even if we're pushing it little by little, then keep steady on what you're learning, and know your limits in that. Also, I've seen that some of us new Muslims, we will have particular difficulty when it comes to memorizing Quran. So of course, when we're memorizing like Juz Amma, when I was memorizing Juz Amma, at first it was something that I kind of had okay with the first few pages. It was a little bit difficult, and this is difficult to memorize. But then what I find, if I recite every single surah that I've learned, if I go through and I recite these every single day in my salah, it solidifies and it's easy. And but then as it comes in, when somebody actually gets the juz tabarak, or they get the juz qad sami'a, and so when they come to this level, at a certain point, I found myself, I would try to memorize. Say, even half a page. It would take me over 30 minutes to an hour to memorize half a page, and this for at the beginning, it was something that was very, very hard. To see that I'm sitting down for an hour and I'm reciting this, and I recite the same ayah over 30 times, or 20 times, and it still didn't stick. And this is something I've had other brothers that talk to me about the same thing when they're new brothers, they're new converts, and they'll have this issue. This is something that it happens, And one of the things that will help this process is when you learn Arabic and you get the basic gist of what's saying, you'll actually memorize the meaning of the ayah, and that will assist you in memorizing the actual ayah. And of course, because just memorizing the ayah, yes, there's a cadence, and there's like the sound of the Quran is a miracle in and of itself, and that's something that's easy to learn and to recite. But there's also the meaning of it that will really hold tight to what you're doing. So I remember when I was reciting, or I was memorizing, and once I hit Surah al-Mumtahina, or Mumtahana. So when I hit this surah, I actually fell up against a roadblock, like within myself, and I wasn't able to do this, and I had a very, very hard time because I didn't understand the certain things in Nahu. And so I was like, I don't understand what's going on at all. There was like some of these things I understood. And I was studying in the Markaz here in Egypt, and I understood most of what was going on. But I was like, no, I don't understand this at all, because I was still very new in my Nahu. And so I took a bit of time, and once I learned Nahu and I came back to it, it was very, very easy. And so also I found myself making a lot of mistakes before learning Nahu. And then after I learned Nahu, then these mistakes I would fix myself, knowing that this is incorrect. Like sometimes the tongue will just go in and make a mistake. But if your mind is with you and doing this, the Nahu, having a knowledge of Nahu will help you so, so much. And this is also a thing when people talk about Nahu, what is the importance of learning Nahu? It's like that it really keeps the tongue from going and making big mistakes. And of course, people can make serious mistakes in the Quran without even knowing it because of their lack of knowledge in Nahu. So this is something that someone should learn it, and when they learn it, it will help them with the memorization. And also, this is when somebody is memorizing, of course, when they do these other things that help them out, and then they keep reading the Quran, and they keep this steady habit of reading the Quran, this will, after time, it will build up to where they're able to memorize a lot quicker. And so I still, me personally, I've memorized over half the Quran, and I'm looking to finish. I have about a third left right now. And so now, if I want to recite and I want to learn, memorize a page, it takes me around 20 minutes. And then sometimes it can be a little less, and sometimes a little more, depending on my concentration. And but this is something that somebody can do. It's not an impossible task. And you should never tell yourself, this is impossible for me to memorize the Quran. And also look at, why are you memorizing the Quran? If you want to memorize the Quran, why are you memorizing it? Are you memorizing so you can say, I'm a hafiz, or are you memorizing it so that you will have the word of Allah in your heart, and that whenever you need to come back to what Allah says, it comes in an instant. You don't have to open up the phone. You don't have to look at a mushaf or to figure out what it is. You don't have to rummage through, but rather when you need an ayah, it's there for you. This is one of the beauties of having something that's when you've memorized the Quran, that whatever ayah you need, it'll be there and it'll be with you. And there'll be so many times, especially when you know Arabic, there'll be so many things in your life, in conversations with people. When you have a conversation, that there'll be an ayah that's the perfect, it's the perfect fit for what your conversation should be. You should just say that ayah because it's the thing that is what's needed in that conversation. And so, and also for someone who wants to call to Allah and call to the Deen of Islam, then knowing the Quran and having that memorized, or at least big portions of it memorized, this is one of the biggest things that you can have in your arsenal for calling people to Allah, is that you have the Quran memorized. And also, one of the other beautiful things, and the things that keeps me going when it comes to memorizing, is that I want to be of those people who finish the Quran over and over and over and are constantly pondering the Quran. And there's some people that they'll read the whole Quran through in a month, and some people they'll read it they'll read it every they'll read it a couple times in the month, and some people they'll read it every 10 days, and this is of course this is one of the best things. And there's even some people that read the Quran every single week. They read the whole Quran, they review it after they've memorized it. And this is something that you will see that ayah that you read the week before, or like a couple weeks before, when it comes back to you, it holds a special place in your heart. And I'm coming back and reading these surahs, and every single surah is unique. And there's a special place in my heart that I find when I read these certain surahs. Like if I read Surah Al-Fath, and this is something that I love coming to it. When I come to it, I'm like, yes, this is Surah Al-Fath. And so if I read certain surahs, such as Surah Al-Baqarah, or if I read Surah Al-Ma'idah, or some of these surahs that when I haven't read them in a while, when I come back and I read it again, there's a special place for it, and like there's like a yearning in my heart to go back and read this. And I hope that we all get that love for the Quran, and may Allah give that to us. And also, another tip that is very, very beneficial is for someone to follow up whatever they've memorized, or whatever they are currently memorizing, to follow it up with tafsir. And so originally, before I learned Arabic, I would follow up whatever I memorized. I would read the tafsir in the English translation of the tafsir Ibn Kathir. So I would read this, and I would follow up whatever I memorized with the tafsir. And this was a good way for me to get through the tafsir, one, to understand what I'm reading, and also see the different hadith. Of course, Ibn Kathir, he comes up with different hadith that have to do with this ayah. And so I'd follow up whatever I read with tafsir. And now once I've learned Arabic, then I can go actually to the Arabic tafsir. And whether I listen to a tafsir, because I can do like an audiobook and I can listen to it as well, or if I go and I read the tafsir, all of this is something that helps solidify that memorization, and it actually brings that closeness with the Quran that you will never have unless you've studied the actual meaning of the Quran. And the Quran is a miracle in its words, as well as the sound that we hear, as well as the meaning. There's nothing that's like it. All of these different areas, it's a miracle in and of itself in every single one of these areas. And also, when you're reading and when you're doing review, you should always be reviewing whatever is new memorization. Like every single day, you review the new memorization. So if you've memorized, say, you've memorized a couple ajzat, and so if you have like a juz or 2 or 3 or 4, then you should memorize whatever the most new thing. You should review that the portion. So say if you have like now I have memorized I review a juz of what is the most new memorization for me. So in the morning I would come up and I review that juz. The first thing that I do is I would review that new portion, because this you need to have a lot of extra attention for what is new and to review that. And then make sure that you're always reviewing what is old, because if you don't review it, you'll lose it. Like this is something that of course anybody who has memorized the Quran, they know it runs away very quickly if you don't review it. And you need to always stay with a consistent schedule, and whether you make like reminders in your phone or something that you're going through and doing this, but you should always make sure that you're reviewing what you memorized, as well as giving special attention what is the newest thing that you've memorized, because that really solidifies it. And also memorizing the Quran is also one of the best times for you to ponder its meaning. And there will be many times when I find myself, I'll be reading something and I will see whether it was Nahu. I would see what I just learned in the last class of Nahu. I'll see that in the Quran, and I'm reviewing that, whatever that qawaid or qaida that I learned. I'll see that in what I'm memorizing. And while I'm memorizing, I'm thinking, oh, this is that qawaid. So I'm doing two things with them, doing two things at once. One, I'm memorizing the Quran, and I'm also reviewing what I learned in my last class with that. And the same thing goes with sarf. You'll find that in every single page. And the same thing with balagha. A lot of times I'll find these different things, and I'll try to, when I'm memorizing, I'll think about what is the benefit of like what is the fa'ida balaghiyah that's here, and like looking at what is the benefit of this with balagha, like what does this mean, and like pondering this. And also another beneficial thing is if while you're memorizing you have a Quran that on the side of it has the words that are gharib al-Quran, like tafsir al-gharib. So if you have these words that are the words that are unknown, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, most of the words in the Quran you can learn like 70 or 80% of them, and they repeat themselves. But there's this last 20%. this is something that there's a whole subject for it, like Gharib al-Quran, which is the words that are the not well known when it comes to like the general person. So having that on the side of the Quran, like some of the Quran that you'll see has this. Or even if you have like a tafsir, I use tafsir al-Jalalain, or there's also a mukhtasar al-tafsir that has like it'll have the meaning of the Quran in the side. And of course, if you don't know Arabic yet, you can get a mushaf. That's like the tajweed mushaf. There's a tajweed mushaf out there that on the side it has the translation of the Quran in English, and so you can actually look and see the general meaning. Of course, this if you have like the particular book that I'm talking about here, it is the translation of Yusuf. I think it's Yusuf Ali, and there are mistakes in this. So of course you need to be aware that this translation, there's definitely some mistakes in it. But to get the general meaning of what's going on, this is beneficial. And the last thing that I want to talk about is that this person, when they're such as a new Muslim and they're learning the Quran, don't be hard on yourself, and don't despair if you find yourself on a single page or half a page for an hour and you feel like you didn't learn anything, because you have spent your time reading the Quran. One, that time is not wasted. Two, if you're struggling reading the Quran, you're getting double the reward. And three, like this is something that is something that will pass, inshallah. And we go through this, and like whoever's a new Muslim, they come into Islam. Especially, I'm like 30 years old, so I'm not like someone who came in as a teenager. So like, of course, like for me to memorize is different, and also given like my past and whatnot as a hippie, like sometimes when it comes to memory, this is not my it's not my strongest suit. But after coming into Islam, like of course there are some things that are harder for me than it would be for someone who is that is like a born Muslim, because they were familiar with the Quran, they've heard it their whole life. And of course, surrounding yourself with listening to the Quran is also a very helpful thing. If you find yourself coming overseas, such as Egypt or somewhere, and you're wanting to study the religion, and you come in to learn Quran, and you spend most of your time on the Quran, there's a few brothers I've seen that have gotten very, very despaired, because they will spend all of their time on the Quran. Like they'll spend their whole day on the Quran. They'll get tired from the Quran, and at the same time, getting tired from the Quran, they'll also start to learn some Arabic at the same time, and they only stick to these two subjects. And of course, they're wanting to learn the Deen, and the Deen is more than just the Quran and learning Arabic. These are things that are helpful. But of course, having other subjects that you also study, such as Seerah, or whether you're listening to lectures on the Seerah that are available on YouTube, or going to different classes, and also taking other things in Aqidah, and also making sure that you have multiple different things that you're learning will refresh you. And when you come to the Quran, it'll be something you're excited for and you're looking forward to, as opposed to if all of I was doing was just focusing like 80% of my time on the Quran. Not that I wouldn't get burned out, but there are brothers who do, they feel a hardship when they come to the Quran, and this is the last thing that someone ever should have when they come to the Quran. They should not hurt themselves or like wear themselves out by trying to memorize so hard when it's hard for them. Take a break, learn some Nahu, or if this is not something that, if you find yourself not focusing when it comes to Nahu, okay, study the Sirah. And if you find yourself that this is something, also go and study fiqh, and have something that breaks up the different things that you're learning, because this will help you have more stamina and perseverance when it comes to studying the Deen and the religion. And you'll see that all these things, they help each other. And you're not leaving the Quran by learning the Sirah, because you're never gonna really understand tafsir until you understand when did this ayah come down, and what is like the scenario or the context of this ayah coming down. And when you learn the Sirah, okay, this will help me with tafsir. And then like also learning tafsir is a break from the memorization or the revision. But when you give every single thing its own amount of time, and you don't go overboard in one thing, this gives you a refreshing, and gives you like a bit of like energy to come to these different things. Sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير